I'm Kimberly Rogers, and you're listening to the Torah portion called Yitro for Shabbat, January 21st and 22nd, 2011, from sundown to sundown. This message is brought to you by themessianicmessage.com. I hope you enjoy this teaching. Yitro, it's Exodus 18, verse 1 to chapter 20, verse 26. And the Haftarah is Isaiah 6:1 to 7, verse 6, and 9, chapter 9, verses 6 and 7. And the Brit Hadashah is Matthew 5, verses 17 to 32. Yitro is the name Jethro. The central event of Yitro is the giving of the Torah at Mount Sinai, but the beginning of Yitro contains a mystery that is actually a prophecy. It starts by telling us about Yitro, the priest of Midian. Who was Midian? Well, he was a son of Abraham by a different wife, Keturah, after Sarah died. Midian was Isaac's half-brother, whose name actually means contention or strife. Midian means contention or strife. This describes for us a split in Abraham's family, similar to the current split in God's family, the split that happened when Rehoboam and Jeroboam split up the nation of Israel. Let's go to Exodus 18, verse 1. Jethro, the priest of Midian, Moses' father-in-law, heard of all that God had done for Moses and for Israel his people, how the Lord had brought Israel out of Egypt. Now Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, had taken Zipporah, Moses' wife, after he sent her home. I'm going to stop right there because we have two verses in a row that mention that this is Moses' father-in-law. Now, it's not so significant that Jethro is Moses' father-in-law as that it's being mentioned twice. The reason that it's being mentioned twice is to signal something to us, and that signal is that this is a prophecy. Verse 3, along with her 2 sons. The name of the one was Gershom, for he said, I have been a sojourner in a foreign land, and the name of the other Eleazar, for he said, the God of my father was my help and delivered me from the sword of Pharaoh. Jethro also has 2 other names in Scripture, Ruel and Raguel, and you can find those in Exodus 2, chapter 2, verse 18, chapter 4, verse 18, chapter 18, verses 1 to 6, and Numbers 10:29. The Bible tells us that Yitro was a Midianite priest. Now, prophetically, this points to the house of Israel's priesthood. Why is that? Well, let's look at what happened to God's kingdom when Rehoboam and Jeroboam split up the kingdom. The house of Israel set up its own priesthood, which all the way down to today, they maintain is related to Abraham. But we have to realize that the house of Israel's priesthood was not sanctioned by God. Neither was Yitro's Midianite priesthood sanctioned by God. God only recognizes the priesthood that he put in place, and those would be the priesthood of Melchizedek and the priesthood of the Levites. The house of Israel has maintained a priesthood from the time of Jeroboam and Rehoboam. Today we know that priesthood as a Catholic priesthood. Even though that priesthood was set up by Edomites, it still serves the house of Israel, which is scattered in the western nations where that priesthood is most prevalent. So today's Christian priesthood parallels Yitro's Midianite priesthood. Now, Moses was a type of Messiah, as most of us already know, but he was married to a Midianite woman. Her name was Zipporah, and she was a type of Israel. She was first of all a rebellious and prejudiced wife, just like the house of Israel. And Zipporah and Moses were separated for a time. Remember? She fell out of favor with Moses. But she was then restored back to his favor. Do you remember that in this Torah portion, the priest of Midian, Yitro, brought Zipporah back? What was the cause of Zipporah falling out of favor with Moses? Well, she disagreed with the Abrahamic covenant. And isn't that still the issue today in Christian church? The reason I say that is because in Exodus 4:25, Zipporah took a sharp stone. Remember when they were traveling from Midian to Egypt? Apparently Zipporah and the two boys were with them. She took a sharp stone and cut off the foreskin of her son and cast it at Moses' feet and said, "Surely a bloody husband are you to me." So that situation had to do with circumcision. And in the church today, circumcision is a big point of contention surrounded by controversial interpretations. Now their sons are types of the two houses. Gershom means stranger or estranged, and it pictures the separation of Israel away from their land. And Eliezer means, "The God of my father was my help and delivered me from the sword of Pharaoh." Now typically today, here at the end, especially in the last 2,000 years, it has been the Jews who celebrated deliverance from Egypt, not Christians, not the house of Israel. And typically it has been Jews who talk about the God of their forefathers. You don't hear that coming out of the mouths of Christians. Christians do not usually talk about the God of their forefathers. See, they don't relate themselves back to Abraham in as strong a way as the Jews do, or in as strong a way as the Hebrew Roots movement does. Now, who is the house of Israel associated with from the time of its scattering in 721 to 722 BC? Who does the house of Israel become associated with? And who is the house of Israel associated with at the time of Yeshua? Well, Gentiles. Zipporah was brought back to Moses by a Gentile, by Yitro. Yes, Yitro's forefather Midian was a son of Abraham, but he was not joined to the right line of inheritance. Remember, to inherit the kingdom, you have to come through the line of Isaac, and Midian was not through the line of Isaac, so Midian is a type of Gentile. Zipporah represents the history of the house of Israel. She is espoused, divorced, and then restored. Now, the beginning of Yitro is a prophecy of the Torah being given twice. The Torah was given at the beginning of the Israelite nation during the time of Moshe, and it will be given again at the beginning of the Messianic kingdom during the time of Moshiach, at the time of the restoration of the complete house of Jacob. That is, at the prophetic restoration of Zipporah in this Torah portion, Yitro. Both times of the giving of the Torah will be to the whole house of Jacob, and that can only happen after the restoration is complete. So far we have the prophecy of the marriage of the house of Israel to the bridegroom Yeshua, just as Moshe married Zipporah. Zipporah was then estranged from Moshe, just as the house of Israel was over the Abrahamic covenant. which is a central issue of Christianity today. Now, there's a little bit more to this prophecy. Zipporah was not with Moshe at the time of the Exodus. This is important because the house of Israel will not be with the Hebrews, the Jews, and those who are in the Hebrew roots movement at the time of the greater Exodus. Now, Yitro and Zipporah, the house of Israel, meet up with the Hebrews, the Jews, and those who have gone through the greater Exodus, those in the Hebrew roots movement, after those folks have passed through the Red Sea experience. Now it's time to give the Torah to all of the seed of Abraham, everyone who is grafted in through the line of Isaac, not Midian. And that's exactly what will happen. Once the Hebrews who are visible in the world, that is the Jews and the people in the Hebrew roots movement, once we get out of the beast system, and once we pass through the Red Sea, and we've had some tests in the wilderness, and we've been there for a little bit of time, like, for instance, this event in Yitro happens at the beginning of the 3rd month, so after a little bit of time we'll be out there, and then the rest of the house of Israel will meet up with us, because we will be given the Torah again. Well, it's unclear in prophecy at what point the Torah will be given. Will it be at or close to the beginning of the Great Tribulation, that last 3.5 years? Or will it be when we get into the kingdom? Well, the jury is still out on this. There are lots of reasons to think either way, and I have not made up my mind on this, so you'll have to do your own study to see when you think the Torah will be given again. Okay, let's go to Exodus 18, verse 6. And when he sent word to Moses, I, your father-in-law, Jethro, am coming to you with your wife and her 2 sons with her, Moses went out to meet his father-in-law and bowed down and kissed him, and they asked each other of their welfare and went into the tent. Well, a lot of people try to make something out of Moses bowing down to his father-in-law. That was a typical, customary Middle East protocol when accepting an honored guest. That's all that is. That's not Moses bowing the Torah to Midian or to any Gentile. No, that's just a custom. Verse 8, Then Moses told his father-in-law all that the Lord had done to Pharaoh and to the Egyptians for Israel's sake, all the hardship that had come upon them in the way, and how the Lord had delivered them. And Jethro rejoiced for all the good that the Lord had done to Israel, in that he had delivered them out of the hand of the Egyptians. And Jethro said, Blessed be the Lord, who has delivered you out of the hand of the Egyptians and out of the hand of Pharaoh, and has delivered the people from under the hand of the Egyptians. Now I know that the Lord is greater than all gods, because in this affair they dealt arrogantly with the people. Isn't that interesting? Jethro knows who the Lord is, but he is familiar with all gods. We're going to talk about that in a minute. And Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, brought a burnt offering and sacrifices to God, and Aaron came with all the elders of Israel to eat bread with Moses' father-in-law before God. Okay, we're going to take a look at this phrase, father-in-law, again, because we can see now that it has been used repeatedly. So we have to identify who is this father-in-law. Well, prophetically, this father-in-law is a shadow of an idea of Yahweh that Gentiles have